Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Greg Hutchins. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning, Greg. How you been?
Hey, not bad. Not bad. You know, staying out of the bars, staying out of trouble.
Well, I understand you went to the coast and did a little surfing or camping or a little both. And
yeah, better than doing ice camping with 40 feet of snow up in the Rockies.
Yeah, that's what I heard you were heading to. And then I saw the great big snowstorm heading your way, so I thought that wasn't going to happen. Didn't have quite the right equipment for 40-foot drifts.
Yeah, and my daughter called me a pussy, so I guess that's an anchor I'm going to have for a while, but that's okay.
Yeah, no,
it's all good.
You live to tell the tale. That's the better part of it.
Yeah.
You know, the other day we were chatting with a group of us get together and chat once in a while, and one of the topics, you know, I think Boeing came up as an example, and a handful of other organizations that basically put a whole lot of not responsibility, a whole lot of requirements on their supply chain, their suppliers, and then cut the pay going to them. And I think it was Boeing is kind of the poster child for that recently, but it's not uncommon in my mind. Yet it devastates reliability. So I'm always interested in how an organization is treating their suppliers, because you can't ask for perfect when you're paying for crappy. I just don't get that dichotomy. You know, we know your margin's small and it's going to get smaller. Send us more products. I don't think that logic works. I really have never understood that.
You've never managed a supply base, have you?
No, but I've also done plenty of audits and assessments prior and after the suppliers have been brought on board for their quality programs and reliability programs and their ability to make, in particular, circuit boards. And I was an input into the decision to work with them or not, but I wasn't the final decision.
Okay, so I'll give you the perspective, which is what we were talking about earlier, of somebody who's run $1 billion supply chain. And this was in the electric power industry. We had a contract with a large federal organization. So there were two pieces of supply management, actually more. There was a quality and reliability piece, which my company ran. I owned the company. And then the business side, which was costing and basically trying to shave some margin from the supplier. Mm-hmm. I made all the decisions on the quality reliability side. And quite honestly, again, this is a federal organization, a large one, very large one. And we did all the technical decisions for the supplier. The business people, meaning the federal organization, actually chose the supplier and negotiated the contract. So there was a bifurcation of responsibilities there. Mm-hmm.
So you made sure that they had three options that would meet the technical needs, maybe different trade-offs, but the business side got to pick the business they wanted to work with.
Yes. And once they chose the supplier, we were responsible for making sure that the product was good. We tested the product, or we chose a supplier to test the product. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there were a lot of screw-ups. There were a lot of right decisions. There were some big fiascos, for example, and one that I almost was litigated on. But bottom line, supply management is a big deal. Now, this is what's happened in supply management. We've gone from purchasing, which is what it was called.
Well, it used to be materials and discrete components, and we did in our own factories, we'd assemble it. That's gone away.
Well, material management is at this factory side. There's inventory management, there's supply management, which is actually logistics, and then there's actually managing the supplier. All those things have been put together into an area now called supply management, or sometimes supply chain risk management,
right?
Because risk is sort of the overarching theme.
Yep.
And when people say, oh, yeah, I have now 5 years experience in supply management, what they're really talking about is logistics.
Yeah, and I've also run into people that say that, and they're really just procurement. They find the right capacitor vendor that'll meet our throughput needs or whatever.
Well, actually, it's less than that. It's choosing the right path from the factory to inventory or factory or
I know the
supplier to the
logistics part
factory.
is a big deal of it. When I was at Hewlett Packard, they had it was kind of like a scorecard for assessing vendors, and it was TQRDC, and then later they added E for environmental.
Mm-hmm.
But it was is it technically the right part or component or subsystem or whatever it is for what we need? Is it meet the needs of whatever we're putting this thing in, or is trying to sell? Quality was quality, and a subset of that was the reliability part was number 2. TQR R was responsiveness, which got kind of fudgy because it was how quickly they responded to a phone call or a complaint or stuff like that. And I don't know how you judge that ahead of time. Sales guys are really good at answering your call. The ops manager, not so much. So I don't know how they really judge that. TQRD. D was delivery. Could they deliver the quantity on time? And that's where the logistics piece, I think, got sorted out to some degree, but there's a strategic level that was beyond that process. RDC. Cost was deliberately near the end, yet it almost always was the first thing.
Yep. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. And TQRDCE was environmental. Are they environmental friendly? They're not dumping toxic waste into the nearby river, stuff like that. Because after a handful of organizations got sued because their vendors were polluters or doing egregious things to the environment, it became a criteria.
So we basically had three. We used a weighted average method, just like you were talking about. So quality would be about 30-40%, cost would be 30%, and delivery would be the difference. So it was quality, cost, delivery. When we started out, when we started managing, quality would be 40%, cost would be, say, 50%, and delivery would be 10%. Yep. Now, again, that changed depending upon the product.
Yep.
Like if you were talking transformers with a 2-year delivery window, obviously delivery would be 70% of the decision.
Yep. Can you even get them in a reasonable time? Yeah, when you need
That's
it.
right. Yeah, exactly. So that's one reason why a transformer $2 million item might be held in inventory for 2 years just in case, right? Just in case management. But when we started this contract, this was 15 years ago, quality would be 40% of the buy decision. When we left that contract after 10 years, because we had the contract with the feds for 10 years, quality was down to 15% of the buy decision in general.
I always thought it had more to do if they took you to a good place for lunch.
Well, when I started doing this business many, many years ago, running quality programs, vendors would come to us at Christmas, back up with their truck and unload cases of very expensive goodies.
Yeah.
Those days are long gone.
It's long gone. But the idea was, and this gets into a whole nother topic, is decision making, and so having a rubric or things that are considered. And I agree that the priorities for one thing or another change depending on the current priorities of the organization. How's that procurement or supply chain manager get paid, or bonuses? What's the incentives? Changes on what's feasible. Like you said, the long lead time transformers. Yeah, the logistics part of it is, because a hiccup on that to 6 months really is going to crush a bunch of future projects if you can't count on them showing it up.
Yep.
I was talking to a guy who's working on a housing development area near here, and just getting the electronics. And they're not talking great big transformers. This is, supplying 220 or 110 to the houses, and just getting the components and the materials to even do that is still difficult. So he said, I didn't expect to be in the supply chain business, but I am.
Yep.
I have to be. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. What I pay attention to is that I know that there's many other criteria, and cost is the one and anybody that's listened to more than 10 episodes of the show usually hears me rant on procurement and always wanting to lower the price from the vendors and, strip out some margin of it. And I get it. It's a big part of many organizations of the cost of their product is buying the bits and bobs and pieces that go into it, whatever you're making, including the manufacturers. More and more organizations outsource their manufacturing. And so they're part of the supplier base now. And so how do you balance all of those? And it's a big pot of money that goes into buying stuff to build your products. And so if you can save money on a big pot of money, it's a bigger opportunity to make a difference to the margin, the bottom line, and the price point you can charge customers. I get that. Where I draw the line, and what I saw the better people I worked with in various organizations, they say, well, we consider all these things, and it's not a straight line weighted average. There's a threshold. There's a minimum. If the quality is so poor that it just won't work for us, there's no waiting there at all. We're just not going to, it kills the deal. Is there an option to improve the quality? And if not, then pass. But it could be any one of the criteria that, if they were very, very flaky on logistics and the very high risk because of geopolitical problems around the world, or if they happen to be shipping to Baltimore here recently, then they'd be vetoed on that one criteria because they exceeded a minimum threshold. And so it's not always flexible to get what you want. It's not always flexible to, we'll trade off that. It's okay if they never deliver anything to us, but we'll send them money to send us parts. You know what I mean? There's a threshold. And so the supply management team managed that threshold so that they could put a lower bound on the decision making, saying, if they're outside the bounds of what's acceptable, then there's no deal.
When I got into this business, I hate to say how many years ago, 45 plus, the buyer, and again, the department was called purchasing at that time, was normally a second level manager in purchasing. Head of purchasing was a second level manager. Now, head of supply management in a lot of companies is an EVP, executive vice president.
Yeah.
10 levels higher.
Yeah. But it's also a lot more strategy going into this stuff. And you mentioned the risk management piece of it, which is a whole lot more complicated these days than it used to be, where I could get all my components right down the road because all of our, in the auto industry, everything was near Detroit. That's long gone.
So one of the things that's happening is that a lot of companies, I'll bring up Nike. Nike basically is a brand company.
Yep.
You've got, in terms of, when you look at the value of property, plant, and equipment, like manufacturing would be property, plant, and equipment on a balance sheet. That's X. The brand equity might be 100X. Yep. Should I say that again?
No, I get it. Yeah, no, it's there. And that's why they're watching, you hear about them in the news. It's not about their factory,
it's their supply chain.
Their supply chain to some extent, but it's more one of their label stars said something inappropriate or bad or whatever, or got thrown in jail. And then they drop that association and run away from that brand ambassador, for the lack of a better word. You know what I mean? The people that are getting...
It's reputational risk.
Yeah, yeah. They pay way more attention to that, from what I can see, little bit I know about their organization.
And that's one reason why this position, second level manager, now is an EVP. Because a lot of companies in the U.S. used to be. Now, this is changing, which is another podcast. Right now, a lot of companies, I'm thinking of Nike example because they're down the street from us, they basically manage their brands. And if you've got somebody who says something inadvertent or sexist or whatever, or does something inappropriate, reputational risk comes into play. The other piece is economic risk and geopolitical risk.
Yep.
And that's one reason why I'm sort of banging the drum. I'm a one horse pony or one
risk management. It's a part of everything.
Supply chain risk. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, what about companies like Procter and Gamble? From what I understand, that organization is the brand managers pretty much run the organization.
Yep.
And it's all about brand, and they'll have multiple products on the shelves at different price points with different brand promises, basically. Yes. But it's all perception, and at the end of the day, one person's hand soap's pretty darn similar to anybody else's hand soap, and there's cosmetic differences. I ran into a hand soap the other day. The only reason I bring this up is I ran into a hand soap the other day that's really smelled awful. You'd want to wash your hands after you put that stuff on your hands. And it was just, I don't know if it turned or it spoiled. I don't know if they even could, but it was bad. And so I went looking for some floral one to mask it somewhere. But anyway, the end of the day, soap is soap. And I am quite sure somebody's going to roll their eyes that actually make soap, knowing that it's way more complicated than that. But that's not where the money is. If we can be the one that's a fad, or it's fashionable, or it's cool to have, or I think Apple does that. Their products are, air quotes here, cool. I don't know what current generations call it, but it's, it's the one to have. Brand's important, but I also feel that the brand reputation and I'm the one trick pony on reliability. If your product is not reliable, if it doesn't work, if you bought a pair of Nike shoes and ran one lap around the track and they fell apart and they're billed as track shoes or athletic shoes, I'm not going to buy Nike again because that brand reputation just got slammed because of my personal experience. And I'm going to go online and tell everybody that I can reach about it.
So let me sort of articulate the company point of view. And again, this was the previous podcast because I'm sort of the voice of the company. The organization has a business model that basically says we're going to focus on brand equity. We're basically going to sell our product. Everything else we're going to outsource. So what that basically means is that the supply chain risk manager, the EVP, basically becomes the chief operating manager because he or she is running the supply chain. All the product that's coming in is basically outsourced.
And including designs, a lot of cases. They'll do a concept sketch of what they want it to look like, and then somebody else will design it, somebody else will build it, and they do the sourcing of the materials.
That's right.
Labor.
That's right. So now we've got the EVP. We've got the supply chain risk manager, who's really at the same level as the CFO, chief financial officer. But the supply manager now is running the whole supply chain and the whole production and the whole, essentially running the whole company.
Yep.
And that depends on the business model of the company, essentially.
Yeah, it's... last time we talked, you said I hadn't had a boss in a while, and it's, but I do remember that you got to understand what your business is about. And some of them I vehemently disagree with. I would have never worked for this military equipment manufacturer that blatantly ignored fixing problems in the design because it would harm their ability to make money on the repair side of the service.
But if that's their business model, Fred,
it is their business model. I said,
then there you go.
They're out of business now because the military said your products are not reliable. And they went and found another resource for it. They built up found another supplier was close enough and invested in them. But it's part of the military procurement process or supplier management process is that they kind of get it to themselves as they do what's the term? It's cost plus design.
Yep.
Very limited margin. It's not what the value of the problem they're solving with their product. It's based on, I got 50 engineers working on this for a year and they pay for that plus a little bit. And these organizations say, well, if we design it so that we're the only ones that can fix it, we can charge them whatever we want then because we got them by the short hairs. And they're like,
and we can bring more people on the job to get that little extra margin.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we
there's
have
that too. So it's like,
we have to understand the business model.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this guy, one quick story and we'll wrap this one up is this, so I was there. I kind of was I was working with the engineering team and all the problems they're having and things they're doing. And they were talking about a lot of their problems are associated with that when they want to make sure that this one key piece of equipment in this device was working, they would have to install it in a box that they knew was already built and working. This is okay. Why don't you have a test rig for this? And it was a product they're going to ship. And I said, well, why don't you how many prototypes do you do? None. The contract says we're going to make 10 of these devices. And they did it down the purchaser would look at the bill of material and it says you need 10 100 puff capacitors. And she would buy 10. If they dropped one on the floor, they'd have to do another purchase requisition.
Full employment.
Oh man, it is outrageous. And so a good number of the problems they had was that this key piece was kind of at the bottom of the box and they had to take everything out. And it was a lot of pretty fussy connections and interconnects and stuff. It wasn't a snap fit by any means. This thing was about as high end tech as I could have ever seen. And I never knew what it did. That required a clearance well above my level. And it was, if you know that's the source of all these problems, why don't you just build 11 and use one of them as your test bed and not plan on never shipping it? Just as long as, and they spent months trying to tweak these things after they reassemble them just to get them to work. And the Air Force was complaining to him. That's the reason I was there, is that your product is causing more aborted missions than anything else on the aircraft. It's the tall pole in the tent. You need to fix it. And when I'm out briefing and saying, here's the recommendations to the general manager and his staff, he's like, what do you mean a prototype? We don't do prototypes. They don't pay for prototypes. They pay for products. And we only build products. And it laid out how much it was costing them and all the other stuff. And one of the guys kind of chimed in and said, think of it as a hangar queen. It's a perfectly good aircraft. We're just going to use parts off of it all the time. And so it's not flight worthy, but it's still on the books as a plane. Oh, okay. That's what you mean. Okay. Yeah, we can do that.
Again, it depends on context. In this case, the business model and the culture of the company.
Yeah, no, it was just, are you so blind that you can't see that this is just driving you into oblivion? Because your customer, it's a very small market that they were, going to. And if they get the perception is that you can't create a reliable product and you just cost us a fortune on the back end, we're going to find another solution. You can't see that? No, I had lunch with them the other day. We're fine,
But if it's a blind organization, it works for them.
Yeah. And they worked themselves right into a new career.
Okay, we got to leave this on a positive note, Fred.
Yeah, I try. I'm not always successful, but it's you got to pay attention, like the supply chain and supply management stuff. And I agree with you, Greg, that it's part of the context of the business. Yet, what is the ramifications in the long run? And there's a whole other issue about short-term thinking and stuff like that.
And decision making
and managing risk and identifying those risks, those kinds of things, and being aware of it. I'm trying to talk like you, Greg, trying to talk like you sometimes. But so if you're listening to this and, and you interact or have to deal with your supply chain, your supply management systems and procurement and all those kinds of things, is it working? Is it helping you and your customers, or is it a headwind? Is it causing friction and problems in the organization? I'd love to hear about it. I love bashing on supply chain stuff, but they can be a really good asset. So it's what's working, what's not, let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. A couple of ways to get in touch with us. Greg and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. So plenty of ways to get in touch. Supply chain management is a big deal. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of money involved in it. lot of connections and interactions and styles and ways to go about doing that. I don't know that there's any one way that optimizes reliability, yet it's still a factor in it, as well as cost and quality and all kinds of other stuff. So look forward to hearing from you and what you think about it. And Greg, I'll talk to you again soon. I'm sure we seem to get together pretty regularly. And
Well, let me leave with two thoughts. One, Biden is going to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming to the U.S. Two,
all goods? I didn't hear that.
Well, on many goods, let's put it that way.
Right.
And if Trump gets elected or reelected, he's talking about 100% tariffs. And that means new supply chains, new business models, new opportunities, especially for consultants to make big bucks. I know.
Yeah. I thought you wanted to end on a high note. Whatever.
Well, I am. I'm saying here's an opportunity. Jump on it.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Greg.
All righty, buddy. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.